Good morning, everyone, and welcome to this press conference for the launch of the Global Cooling Watch 2025 report. My name is Beth Woodthorpe-Evans, and I work for the United Nations Environment Programme and will be moderating the press conference today. I'm delighted to be joined by this panel of speakers. We'll begin with some opening remarks from Inger Andersen, the Executive Director of the United Nations Environment Programme and Under-Secretary General of the UN. We'll also be joined by Alberto Maluf from the Ministry of Environment of Brazil, followed by the Ambassador for Climate Action from Singapore, Ravi Menon, and then also followed by Renato Ogoa, the Mayor of Barcelona. So to begin, I'll hand over to Ms. Andersen. The floor is yours.
Good morning, and welcome to members of the press. It's a real pleasure to be here this morning. And welcome to the launch of the Global Cooling Watch 2025. Now, this launch sets out this report sets out how to increase cooling access to those who need it and dramatically to decrease the expected emissions from what we know is a booming sector. We all understand, especially being right here, right now, that extreme heat is one of the clearest signals of the climate crisis, and it's already causing 500,000 deaths per year. Many of these deaths come in cities where the urban heat islands, in effect, can drive temperatures up to by 10 degrees higher. In fact, I just spent Sunday in the botanical gardens, and the moment you walked in, it was 4 degrees lower. So the point here is that heat matters and heat kills, and it is getting ever hotter. And it is often the very poorest and the most vulnerable who live with this heat and who are the most exposed to that warming dimension. And just increasing by 1.5 degrees, which is what we are now saying in the EGR, the Emissions Gap Report, becomes very real. So the urban oven that we all know when we walk down a street is now turning into an urban furnace. And the UNEP Emissions Gap Report 2025 finds that in spite of our commitments, in spite of the NDCs, we are now heading for a 2.3 to a 2.5 degree world. And that is if we do everything conditionally and everything that we have promised unconditionally. So deadly heat waves will become, I'm afraid to say, more regular, more extreme, and more intense. By 2050, the number of urban poor facing dangerous heat could increase 700%. So access to cooling must be treated as an essential piece of infrastructure, alongside water, energy, and sanitation, because cooling saves lives and keeps economies and schools and hospitals running. But when we say cooling, don't just think air conditioning, please, because we can't air conditioning our way out of this heat crisis. We have to, if we do that, then we will just drive up greenhouse gases, raise costs, cause grid overload, and essentially peak demand. Instead, we have to think about smart buildings, affordable cooling, ambient infrastructure, integrating the environment into the urban setting while cutting energy sectors and the carbon footprint of the cooling itself. This report shows that it can be done through sustainable cooling pathways, and this pathway leans on passive cooling, leans on nature-based cooling, which I referenced, leans on low energy cooling, and leans on hybrid cooling fans, we all know those, combined, yes, from time to time with air conditioning. It leans on energy efficiency, which is critical, especially under the Kigali Amendment, of course, and it leans on fast action to phase down hydrofluorocarbons, which, as we understand, are a very powerful greenhouse gas at 800, the potential of CO2. So the pathway that we present in this report would cut expected emissions by 64% by 2050, from an expected 7.2 billion tons of CO2 to 2.6 billion tons of CO2. At the same time, though, the pathway could also provide access to space cooling or refrigeration, resilient buildings and urban green spaces for 3 billion people, and up to 43 trillion in electricity and infrastructure savings. That is what is needed to protect people and economies from the impact of extreme heat. Now, we have some 72 signatories already to the cooling pledge, and that covers nearly 80% of global cooling emissions. So this is a major success, and they have together committed to this pathway. We're deeply grateful to our hosts here in Brazil for having taken the charge and leading alongside many others on this important and critical work. 29 countries have set a dedicated cooling targets, and 134 have integrated cooling into national climate and energy strategies. We also now, and I'm sure we'll hear from the Vice Minister, the Beat the Heat, now my bad Portuguese, Mutirão contra o calor extremo, implementation drive, an initiative from the COP30 presidency and the UNEP-led Cool Coalition. And here we have over
would be integrating the policy. So in order to deliver that, we were extremely happy, to see Brazil is one of the co-chairs of the Cooling Coalition when we came up with the first idea of doing the Mutirão Beat the Heat, Mutirão contra o calor extremo, against the extreme heat. We had this idea that mayors, they want to do things, but they don't know what to do. That's why it's so important for us to welcome here the UNEP's Global Cooling Watch report, that shows that it's possible and how the cities can do, how the private sector can move, because we're going to have to demand more cooling. This is part of the game. In Brazil, for example, only 1/3 of the schools have cooling. So imagine the impact for the students that have to be, with warmer and heater and at a difficult situation even to go to schools. Some states in Brazil, only 3% of the schools have cooling. So it's extremely challenging. So we feel that the Beat the Heat, Mutirão against extreme heat, could be a perfect opportunity. We have more than 80 corporations supporting UNEP and the Cooling Coalition. I think more than 200, getting to 200 cities, 80 of them from Brazil. And we hope that throughout the Beat the Heat against extreme heat, we can help and support the mayors to understand easier with good data and science what they have to do to model where the extreme heat will be, what are the measures, nature-based solution, passive cooling, green roofs, urban trees, what they have to do and how to get the funding to implement. So for us, it's all about multi-level governance, and fighting extreme heat is for sure one of the climate topics that are easier for people to understand. That's why we have to focus on this, and that's we believe this is such an important action to be launched today. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Minister. And now I'll pass the floor to the Ambassador for Climate Action from Singapore.
Thank you. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, first off, let me commend Brazil and UNEP for launching this initiative to strengthen heat resilience and, of course, the Global Cooling Watch report. Heat is not just a local nuisance. With global temperatures continuing to rise, it is a systemic risk with global consequences. According to the IPCC AR6, about 1 billion people in South and Southeast Asia could be affected by extreme heat. And what do I mean by affected by extreme heat? Heat stress undermines public health. There's growing scientific evidence for this. It reduces labor productivity because it makes outdoor work impossible. It strains electricity systems at types of peak demand for cooling. It compromises food storage and transport under extreme heat, and can amplify humanitarian pressures that ripple across regions. And here I'm talking about the potential for climate migration due to extreme heat. As a highly urbanized city-state in the tropics, right on the equator, Singapore takes a very serious view of these risks. Our part of the world is heating up faster than the global average. Our projections for Singapore show that over the next 70, 75 years, almost every day will exceed 35 degrees Celsius, and some days much more. So we are doing what we can to ramp up our heat resilience. We're investing in robust climate projections to better understand the risks posed by extreme heat and its secondary effects. We have formulated national heat wave response plans for both the general public as well as specific groups which are more vulnerable to heat stress, the elderly, outdoor workers, those who train outside, and so on. We are developing innovative solutions such as cool paint for buildings and cooling vests for outdoor work. All this is work in progress still. And we're taking an increasingly regional perspective to look at Southeast Asia to enhance our collective capacity for a heat-resilient Southeast Asia. So we very much look forward to the global efforts to strengthen heat resilience by sharing our knowledge and capabilities, as well as learning from the experience of others. Beat the Heat is precisely the vehicle the world needs, a mechanism to turn pledges into implementation, to de-risk investment, and to diffuse scalable solutions across countries. Our Minister for Sustainability and Environment, Minister Grace Fu, will set out more details on 18 November at the Global Cooling Pledge Ministerial Roundtable on how we can deepen collaboration in building up heat resilience. So thank you once again to Brazil and the UNEP for reminding us that tackling heat is not optional, it is a necessity. It is about people's lives and livelihoods. It is not a local issue, it is a shared responsibility across countries. So let us pool our expertise, strengthen our tools, and scale our solutions through deeper partnerships for a more climate resilient world. Thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador. And I will now pass the floor to the Mayor of Barcarena.
Bom dia a todos.
Good morning, everyone.
Queria saudar a todos desse dispositivo, falar da satisfação do município de Barcarena
Satisfaction
participar
having
desse
Barcarena
momento tão
here.
importante para o mundo. Dizer que Barcarena vem buscando, ao longo das suas gestões,
Barcarena has been looking
se
along
adequar
the times,
e se comprometer com o combate
compromise
ao
itself
calor extremo
to
e a
tackle
promoção de
extreme heat
resiliência climática.
and increase the
Já
climate
fazemos
resilience.
parte do compromisso global de resfriamento,
We are
já
part of the
aderimos ao
global cooling
mutirão
pledge,
contra o calor
and
extremo
we are in the
e há pouco
beat the
tempo
heat.
fomos reconhecidos pela ONU como centro de resiliência.
The city has been recognized
Não
as a
tenho
resilience
dúvida da
center.
importância desse mutirão para que a gente possa buscar soluções
I'd like to
práticas
reinforce what we are seeing today in terms of heat.
Barcarena já vem buscando algumas medidas para mitigar o efeito desse calor extremo.
Barcarena is doing things
Assumimos
to
o compromisso
mitigate the
de
extreme
plantio
heat,
de árvores nas áreas urbanas da nossa cidade e isso tem dado um resultado muito positivo
and we are
para a nossa
planting a lot of
sociedade.
trees, and this is giving a lot of
Também
positive outcomes.
Estamos buscando sempre promover eventos e debates
We're always
dentro de um projeto de cidade
seeking
resiliente,
in good
a
events
partir da
and
iniciativa
partnerships
Construindo Cidade Resiliente.
with the Green Resilience Cities
Instalamos
program.
também um comitê formado por entidades sociais e governo local
We have a committee with
que visa a redução de
local
riscos e desastres e
organizations
resiliência
and-
dentro do nosso município.
and the
Eu
government
não tenho
to
dúvida que o relatório hoje
work
apresentado
together
pelo
against
Puma
extreme heat in the
irá
city.
de forma significativa nortear as gestões para que nós sejamos mais assertivos e mais eficazes
And we use
em
this
nossas
committee to make
decisões.
sure we are doing the best
Lembrando
work across
sempre
different
que os governos
governments.
municipais, a administração das cidades, é a parte governamental que sempre está mais próxima da população. E com isso, presencia de forma mais próxima as mudanças e os efeitos
With this
que o
committee
calor
and
extremo
working
causa
together
na
with the
nossa
population,
sociedade.
we can see the impacts
Ressaltando
of the city and the
que sempre
population
será
itself.
necessário a interferência do poder público
Public
para poder
government
proteger
is
aqueles que
key
mais precisam.
to help those more
E o
vulnerable
calor extremo ele afeta principalmente as crianças que vivem em
and extreme
vulnerabilidade,
heat
como
impact
também
mostly kids
uma
in
população
vulnerability
crescente hoje que é a população de idosos,
and
que
also
precisam da nossa
older
atenção.
people,
Então eu
which
tenho
is growing.
certeza que esse relatório irá ajudar os
I'm
municípios,
sure this
ajudar
report
os governos
will
locais
help
a
cities
serem realmente assertivos
in getting
e
better
eficazes em
at the
suas
work, in
decisões.
helping these people and
Agradeço
protecting them.
a Penuma pelo convite
I would like to
e
thank
parabenizo
Anderson
pela
and
conclusão desse
UNEP
relatório.
for
Muito
inviting
obrigado,
me
bom
to
dia
be
a
here
todos.
and at this press conference. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. I'll now pass the floor to Ruth Zugmundakoto, the Deputy Director of the Climate Change Division at UNEP, for a brief overview of the report. So if we could have the slide.
Thank you very much, Beth. And, would it be possible to have the slides? Great. So I'm here to present the main findings of the second edition of the Global Cooling Watch report, developed in collaboration with more than 60 partners. The last 2 years were the hottest on record, and as we heard, by 2050, by rising temperatures, more frequent extreme heat days, rapidly expanding cities, and Also, higher income from middle class will be able to buy more air conditioners. Our report looked ahead to the future and asked the question, what will it take to stay on a sustainable path? Because cooling is vital. Unfortunately, as you can see, the more we cool, the more we emit. So cooling emissions are growing and will double by 2050 if we do not adopt more sustainable cooling practices. However, what the report has shown us that there is a pathway that it's called the sustainable cooling pathway that demonstrates that we can meet this demand for cooling that we all need while cutting emissions if we implement measures together. Passive cooling and nature-based solutions that do not require electricity, which is very important, that's what will lead to emissions. Low energy and hybrid cooling that don't require a lot of electricity, and best-in-class energy efficiency, and of course, a faster phase-down of climate-warming refrigerants. If we bring these measures together, we can slash 64% of emissions compared to business as usual. And of course, if we decarbonize the grid, then we can get to near zero. The good news are that the solutions are at our fingertips. 2/3 of the emissions that I mentioned could be actually reduced and the emissions reductions achieved if we actually bring together a number of measures. So for instance, when we talk about passive cooling and nature-based cooling solutions, we are talking about shading, air circulation, insulation, glazing, reflective surfaces, that need to be available for other electricity needs. These are low cost and payback quickly solutions, and actually we offer cooling access to low-income and vulnerable populations. If we also bring fans and air conditioners together in a hybrid approach and solar chillers, then these low-energy, sustainable passive cooling solutions could be very powerful. Let's talk about now the benefits, right? Because cooling brings a lot of benefits, and if we actually avoid using electricity, we can actually save up 43 trillion on electricity use energy bills and avoided the grid strengthening and infrastructure development. If we do that, we can expect access to cooling to 3 billion people. Today, 1 billion by 2050, apologize. Today, up to 1 billion people still lack access to cooling, and that's a lot of people. And of course, the more we cool, the more we will see less heat-related deaths, less illnesses, higher productivity, food security, and more livable cities. How do we get there? That's, I think, the key question, right? So how are we going to get there? The report found that there is a little bit of a gap into building codes that are not including passive cooling solutions that we just talked about. And this is a very important finding. So if building codes can actually make passive cooling solutions mandatory, we believe that we can actually have a very transformative approach to cooling. So that is a very important measure that are in the fingertips of mayors. Building codes are at the city level. We also believe that if we do it together with ratcheting up minimum energy performance standards and helping countries to fast the phase down and implementation of low global warming potential refrigerants, then this is very powerful and these policies can actually support each other. So this is the last slide, and what we believe is what is important is to link national policies and local policies. At the national level, we heard ambassador of Singapore, saying how important it is to have national cooling plans and integrate national cooling plans into climate plans, national adaptation plans. But we also heard from Adalberto how important it is to actually empower the cities to take action, and that's why we're doing the Beat the Heat. And I think that finishes my very short and quick presentation of the report. I ask you to please take a look at that and the report. Thank you very much.
Thank you to all the speakers, and of course the report is available on unep.org and all the media materials are there as well. So we'll now open the floor. We've got a few minutes for questions. If there are any journalists that have any questions, if you could raise your hand. There are some microphones around. Don't see any other questions out there. One just here on the front. Thank you. If you could just say where you're from and then your question if it's directed to anyone.
Hi everyone, my name is Jakub Verba and I work with Energy Saving Trust. We heard a lot about cooling in cities, which is of course extremely important, but I'm also curious to hear if UNEP and the Cool Coalition partners are looking into providing cooling solutions for rural areas. With increasing climate change happening, rural populations have no access to electricity, affordability is low, and there are usually no available solutions to cool people down during heat waves. So I'm curious to hear if that's also on the radar of the panelists. Thank you.
No, thank you very much. Of course, where the big energy load is and the big CO2 release loads are is in the urban setting, quite right. But that doesn't mean that people are not suffering from extreme heat in rural settings. Part of what we look at in that context is through our building and construction program, because this is where building with breezeways, building with the ambient qualities that weather and wind and sun will provide, in a sense. In days past, that was how communities built, and many communities still do. However, with a greater, even rural agglomeration, some of that has been lost. Part of the work that we're doing here is frankly learning from the past, learning from those who went before us. Sometimes they are indigenous people, other times they are just rural communities that know the ways. We happen to be based in Nairobi, Kenya, and we know very well what it means to build with nature and understand how you can work with the sun, especially when you sit right on the equator, and so working with the ambience that there is. This was, by the way, a topic that was very much discussed in the desertification COP as well, that took place in Saudi Arabia just last year, because there the drought and desertification and the ensuing sand and dust storms are very real, and rural communities are hit just as badly as urban communities. And so everything is linked to everything, which is why the adaptation responses are so critical as well, so that you can fix the sand, enhance rural ecosystems, and ensure that the soil moisture is retained to a degree so that that also will provide part of the cooling. Thank you.
Thank you. If there's no more questions, oh, sorry, right in front of me, in fact. Thank you.
Thank you. My name is Thiago Pietrobon from the ABRAVA, Brazilian Association of Refrigeration and Air Conditioning. And I would like, well, first, congratulations by the work. And I would like to know if the report talking about the end of life, the equipment, as a solution or an opportunity to recover these refrigerants as a mitigation solution. Thank you.
Maybe I'll start out and I'll ask my colleagues and fellow panelists to. One of the issues that we have had in the Montreal Protocol has been dumping, and we're pleased to see that past COP MOPs have in fact passed decision on against dumping, i.e., and we see it frankly also in the vehicle industry, but let's leave that one aside for now. that equipment that is no longer lawful because it is inefficient in one economy gets dumped in another and sold for installation. So the Montreal Protocol is a critical tool in the toolbox to ensure that dumping is out of it's still happening, but at least there is some degree of enhanced inspection at ports. On the issue of circularity of the equipment, I'll ask my colleague to respond.
Thank you very much for your question, actually. Just to complement what our executive director just said, we do have also cooperation with the Climate and Clean Air Coalition of avoiding dumping of used cooling equipment that have refrigerants, as you have mentioned, and Ghana is the country leading on that because they have been leading on avoidance of electronic waste for a long time. And we have been working also with our colleagues within UNEP on the circularity because it's not that easy to dismantle. You are from the refrigerant sector, you know very well that if you do not build for dismantling, you cannot actually make the material circular. So we're working very much upstream with the industry to actually design and develop cooling equipment that can actually be dismantled and the materials and the metals recovered and the refrigerants recovered in a safe way. So thank you very much for your question. That's a very important point. Thank you.
Thank you all for your interest today. The Beat the Heat initiative will be launched later today at 2:30 p.m. in side event room 3. All details are online, and we hope to see you there during this thematic day on sustainable cooling. Thank you to the speakers on the panel and for hearing your stories and your important work. We appreciate it. Thank you.